Hello and welcome to the Matrix. Just kidding, but just always kind of wanted to say that. Today we're going to talk a little bit about rental fraud in the apartment space. You'll notice today my title is the official fraud hacker, and we're going to take a little different approach today. Rather than just share with you how to just cut down on fraud and tips and tricks, we want to take you into the journey of the actual fraudsters, how they are taking advantage of your communities so you can get familiar with the tactics they're using so that you can protect your communities. So let's get started. So a couple quick facts. Here's 4 quick facts, and chances are if you're attending this event, you're probably already experiencing rental fraud, but we'll talk about them anyway. So according to Units Magazine, 68 million renters have a credit score under 600. This is important. We're going to touch a little bit on why that's important when it comes to dealing with rental fraud. And then according to TransUnion, there are over 10,000 fraud rings active today across multifamily. According to the 2018 Forrester study, 97% of multifamily operators are experiencing fraud today. Again, you probably experienced it if you're listening to this, and if you haven't, most likely you will very soon as it's growing at a tremendous clip. We did our own survey of the cost of rental fraud, and this isn't something that's really easy to calculate because you have to consider it's not just lost rent when somebody defrauds your property and you have to evict them. It's obviously lost rent's your largest one, but you've got attorney fees, and then you've also got, you have to flip this unit again, right? You have to turn it again. There's costs involved with that. Plus, just your office staff and having to post the late notices and go through that process. It's hard to really accurately depict the amount. However, we did do an internal study and found that nationwide, the average is $7,500 for the average fraud case in multifamily. Now, of course, if you're in, let's say, California, it might take you 6 months or more to get a fraudulent renter out of your building, so your cost could easily double from there. So let's talk about the motivation for fraud, right? We're in multifamily, so we probably get this. The obvious one is money, right? But there's actually a few different ways or motivations for people to defraud your building. So the different ways they do it with money is they will create a fake persona, a stolen identity, move into your building, and then they will either sublease it to somebody. And it could look something like this, where you create a post on Craigslist that says, I just got a job transfer to Chicago. I'm stuck in this lease for 12 months. I'll rent you my $4,000 a month rental for only $3,500. But I'm not a bank, so you got to give me first, last, maybe a security deposit, and just send it to me on the Cash App or money order, right? So it's untraceable. And so sometimes they'll do this once they take down your unit. Other times they just throw it on Airbnb and make a nightly rate of a couple $100, $200, $300 a night, depending on your market, until you evict them. So there's a lot of pretty high motivators from a financial perspective. And then the other thing to consider too, and this is why I was getting back to that credit score. So you got to remember, when somebody's touring your community, they're trying to get into the apartment. They've decided, hey, I want to live here. It's near my work, my school, or they just like the building. And the first thing the leasing agent says to them is, you got to make 2.7 times the rent. You have to be at your job for a certain amount of years, and you have to have this income. We're kind of paving the road for them. And if they don't fit in that criteria, for instance, let's say somebody had a job loss situation and, they ended up getting evicted. They know if they just tell the truth and say that they were evicted, the chances are you're probably going to decline them. And maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you'll just get a higher deposit. But the bottom line is fear, right? They have a fear of not getting in. So this is on the softer side of fraud. This isn't somebody with a fake mustache and glasses, right? This is somebody who's just trying to fake the pay stubs, fake those things. And so what happens, which you'll see in a moment, is these people will fall into kind of an illegal trap. but it's something that ultimately takes down our industry with it. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So we've all seen the massive leaks of data, right? Equifax, TransUnion, Facebook, all the big carriers. You might have even through your Capital One card or gotten a text that your information was compromised. It's no secret, all our PII, and when I say PII, that's personal identifiable information. This is like your name, address, social security number, basically your identity. So your identity has been leaked from large corporations, and that information is out there. And one of the reasons we still have rental fraud, because we've had great screening services for decades. The challenge is screening isn't catching these because all your information's out there. So people are easily able to basically steal other people's identity and pass it off as your own. One of the things that I would encourage everybody, especially if you're dealing with fraud on a high level, whether you're working on site or you're in the corporate office or tasked on a project, the best thing you can do is just get familiar with this, right? The FBI hires criminals a lot of times, because they know and they understand the back end of it. And so if we just focus on the front end of how to stop fraud, we're not going to be quite as effective. So what I'd recommend you do, just go on YouTube and just search CPN numbers, which you're going to talk about in a second, or how to get into apartment. Just research as much as you can. You'll find, you can see on the screenshot here, tons of videos, and they flat out will tell you how to get into apartments, sometimes specific buildings. You may find your community on there. And they will walk you through exactly how to get around our apartment measures. So make sure you check out some of those videos. Now, Craigslist, I just mentioned CPN. So what CPN is it's called a credit privacy number. Now, CPNs are public enemy number one in the multifamily space. And the reason why is what a CPN really is it's a stolen social security number. They call it a CPN so they can market and sell these online. And so what they do is they try and attract your renters by posting ads on Craigslist, and they're putting in keywords like 2-bedroom in Atlanta or cheap apartment in Southern California, right? So they're trying to just get the person that's looking for the apartment, and then they're telling them, hey, you can use what we call a credit privacy number. It sounds catchy, it sounds legit, and they will say all over their websites and information that it's completely legal, that it's your right to have this privacy number. A lot of these IDs, they start off using a lot of times children under 18 because they know most parents aren't checking their children's socials. But now it's advanced where we have millions of Americans that are incarcerated across the country. So a lot of times they will use people that are incarcerated. So these are real credit accounts and nobody's checking them. And then again, getting back to the large corporations, the large companies that have leaked all of our data out there, they're also just stealing flat out identities. So they're putting these ads together, and they're putting together what a lot of times is referred to as rental approval packages. If you go on Craigslist, Craigslist is trying to take these ads down as often as possible, but they just keep popping up. They'll use images instead of text so that they don't get caught. So you can check in your own market, go onto Craigslist and just search CPNs, search rental approval packages, and then sometimes just search 2-bedroom and scroll, and you'll see these ads just kind of mixed in with regular ads. They basically offer a total approval package, and this is really scary if you're in the industry. You get a CPN number, which is a stolen identity. You will get a fake ID that matches the name on the social. And you'll also get fake pay stubs that match all of these documents. And then in addition, most of the services will also field a phone call. If your property manager calls to verify that income, they will answer the phone and verify your income that you stated. So if you think about it, this package is the easiest way to get into an apartment, because when you run credit, it's going to be legitimate. There is a real person assigned to it. the pay stubs match, the ID matches, all these things. So it's very difficult to detect. Now, it's not just on Craigslist, of course, anywhere you see free postings. So if you go on Facebook Marketplace, you'll find a ton of these. You'll find them in the Facebook groups. People will just post these, and it's always paid by Cash App, so it's not traceable. Now, one of the even more scary things is this is just a business model for fraud rings, right? So they're just trying to sell you these names, and a lot of times they're reselling the same name across multiple states, right? And they're just trying to sell these. So what they're doing is they're creating, and at the end of this deck, we're going to list some of the websites you can go to just get a rental approval package, so that you can go check this out, and just so you understand what you're up against. So you can see some of them on the screen here. There's a lot more. We've even seen it so far where they will build a website, and they will name it close to your apartment community's name. And they will scrape all your pictures and floor plans and pricing and everything off your own real website. They'll make a fake carbon copy of your website, but when you click apply or contact us, it will go to the CPN and they will say, hey, we'll help you get into this place. So it's really shady stuff. They're just making these, they're making them so quickly, it's hard to adapt. But what's worse is obviously it's not just Craigslist and just Facebook and their own websites they're building, but it's all the free classified sites out there. They're just marketing this service, so they're going to blast it everywhere. So it's really not going to go away. There's no way to just shut it down. Even if you were to stop Craigslist, you would still have all these other sites. So when you're searching in Google, you're going to come across either Craigslist, one of these sites. You're basically going to find this service. So a little bit about CheckpointID. So if you're familiar with Checkpoint, simply put is an ID verification service. So when I say ID, I'm talking about that thing in your purse or wallet, the physical ID card. And what we do is we scan the back of that ID, the barcode on the back. We can also do passports from anywhere in the world, but we're using the back of the ID because we know that all these rental approval packages, they're coming with a fake ID that you cannot detect. They have holograms. They will even scan if you're using a basic scanner or something at your office. And so they look real in every level. Checkpoint has a proprietary database of known ID verifications on those barcodes. So when you scan the ID with Checkpoint, which we provide an iPad at your office, use the camera on the iPad, it's just a real quick beep. We will scan that ID and you will instantly get a pass or a fail. So it's a nice little third-party solution. But what it will do is it will cut down on this rental fraud because, again, it's easy to get credit information. Right? It's easy to get pay stubs. What's really hard to get is a real DMV verified ID. So a couple quick tips. So the first thing you want to do is if you're using Checkpoint, obviously scan and verify those IDs. If you're not, it's really difficult because, like I said, you can't tell from the front of ID if it's real or fake. Also, this is a key one to cut down on fraud. These fraudsters are tricky and they're smart and they're always looking ahead, right? So we've even seen situations where if they know you're verifying the IDs on site with, let's say, Checkpoint, they'll sometimes use a real ID, come in and tour, get to know the staff, build some rapport, and then they'll come back to your website and apply online under a different name. So they're always trying to get into your building. So one of the things we stress with our customers is when you're scanning IDs, just because you got a verification doesn't mean you're free and clear. Make sure you're comparing your results in Checkpoint to that application, the pay stubs, any documentation you have, just to make sure it's a match. Sometimes we see different names, and that's really where sometimes you'll catch them in credit. Versus catch them on the ID. But the idea is to try and catch them up front before the even process happens, so you're saving time and money. And then, most of you know this, but, especially with income, there's a lot of padding in their income. A lot of people will they will kind of modify this to basically suit the needs of your property, change their income. They'll buy fake pay stubs. But just make sure you're doing as much Googling as you can, right? Google that company name, Google the address. We've had so many customers that have said everything checked out, but their address when we pulled it up was a vacant building, right? So just, unfortunately, we don't, it's not advantageous to spend a ton of time doing this stuff, but it's super important because again, could be $7,000 to $10,000 that is costing your company. And those extra steps are definitely worth it. So again, parsing alone, and when I say parsing, I just mean if your service is scanning, you're able to scan an ID, but you're not actually verifying it. If you're just parsing the information, you're not going to catch most of these fake IDs. They're designed to be scanned. So make sure you're using some kind of verification, not just parsing those IDs. And then make sure you're checking the names, comparing the names of the results from Checkpoint, which is straight off that barcode and verified, to that application, to that screening results, and to those pay stubs. And then make sure that the business information that you're checking out, that their job exists, that the address is right, and that all the location information is accurate. So we provided a list here just to check it out. And again, we can't stress enough, the best way to understand and be able to catch and identify fraud when it's happening to you is to be as familiar as you can with the way they're doing it, right? So go check out sites for the fake IDs. We've listed a few. You can also Google, you'll find hundreds more. The CPN sites we've listed here, and then also the fake pay stub sites. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with those already. But just get really familiar with it so that you can, identify it when it's happening to you. So that's pretty much it. We did have a couple questions that came in we just want to address. I'm just going to look here. So one of the questions is, what happens if you scan an ID, a prospect standing in front of you, and you scan their ID with Checkpoint and the ID fails, right? And it's a fake ID because you can see the results, right? It's super obvious. What's that confrontation like? So we've designed Checkpoint to be non-confrontational. And the way we do this is if you scan an ID with our iPad, it's not going to say fake ID, rejection, anything like that. All it's going to say is failed ID, we're unable to verify this ID. Do you have another form of ID? So you can either show that to the prospect or let them know, unfortunately, we weren't able to verify this ID. Do you have another one? We find our customers say 99% of the time they're going to tell you, oh, let me run out to my car. I got to go grab my passport at home. And then you'll never see them again. So, just make sure that you're letting them know, hey, we're not saying you can't live here. We're just saying we need another form of ID. So again, non-confrontational scenario. Another one was, what types of IDs have barcodes? So pretty much all the IDs have barcodes. As I mentioned, if you're a Checkpoint customer, we can scan any passport from any country in the world. We can also do driver's license from every state in the United States. We can do identification cards from every state issued. Also Mexican driver's license, Canadian driver's license, and then other forms of government issued ID that has our 2D barcode on it. The last question was, what information does Checkpoint store when they scan? So this is a good one because Checkpoint is completely fair housing compliant. In fact, it enhances your fair housing, right? Because if you're like most of the industry, if you're not using Checkpoint, you're probably taking an ID and putting it in a drawer. A lot of people forget that ID has a lot of information on it. It has your picture, your name, your address, driver's license number, date of birth, and it even has your signature. A lot of people forget about that one. So if you're just leaving that in a drawer, somebody could quickly snap a photo and they've stolen your identity, right? So with Checkpoint, you're not touching any of that, right? Somebody walks in, you're going to scan that ID, immediately hand your ID back to the prospect. So it's a much more secure process for your prospects. And when we capture the data, we verify the data, but we don't save their driver's license number, age, or sex. It's completely hashed out and encrypted, can never be seen. So it's much more secure for your prospects as well. So I hope, I think that was it. So I hope this was helpful for you. We have reps all over the country that would love specialists that can talk to you about fraud problems and all the other benefits of Checkpoint. Feel free to reach out to us. You can reach us on our website. You can request a demo on our website, or even email like support@CheckpointID, and we'd love to schedule time to talk with you. Thanks for attending.